The verse of the day is Matthew 28:20, and it's simply this: Jesus is, "Lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age." It's just after he gave us the Great Commission, the tail end of that. He says, "Hey, look, don't worry, I'm going to be with you. You're not going to have to do this alone." And speaking of the end of the age, Jim mentioned that I have a fig tree in my backyard. So just on the other side of this wall back here is it's a fig tree, and so here's a fig that we are in the second harvest of the year. And if you don't know anything about a fig tree, it's helpful to know that there's two rounds. There's the one at the beginning of the summer, sometime at the beginning of the summer. I never know exactly when it's going to happen, but there'll be maybe a half dozen figs that get ripe, and you get to taste um, uh, what's to come, right? So there's this small first harvest, and then the summer goes by, and there's the fig trees just continuing to create these little buds. It doesn't look like it's doing much though, and then makes it through all the hot part of the season, and then in the fall is when you get your big harvest. And that's where we are right now, is the second coming of the fig. So there's the first coming of the fig and the second coming of the fig, and the latter is the greater one. And so and I don't know if you knew this, but with a fig, it's actually an inverted flower. So if you are to, let's see if I can open this up here for you. If we're to open this fig up, you see these are petals in there that are inverted. I'm not really focused in on there, is it? There you go. So it's basically petals that you're eating, and there you go. It doesn't taste like a fig Newton. I'm not really sure what a fig Newton tastes like, but there you have it. The second harvest of the fig. So that's kind of a interesting. There's an interesting botany there with, as you look at end times, with the second coming of Christ. And so Israel is compared to a fig tree. Israel first, as Jim was talking about, came back into existence. And just before Pastor Jim was born. And now we are waiting for the second fig of the year, the second harvest of the year. And that would be when, I won't go into the eschatology there, but that's the idea there, that we're expecting, we know the harvest is going to come. We just don't know exactly when those figs are going to ripen. I've had years before where the fig will just stay hard and green. It doesn't turn purple like that. And when I looked it up, it's because there's a chemical reaction that has to take place in order for the ripening to happen. And if the conditions aren't right for that chemical to be released, the gas to be released, the figs will just stay green and hard, and they'll stay there all winter long on the, just as hard as a rock on the fig tree. And so we're basically just waiting for that. You're looking at the figs on the tree, and we're just waiting. When is that the gas that the tree needs to be released? When is that going to release to ripen all the figs? And so there's this like expectation of any day now, these are all going to ripen. So interesting there. But Jesus is, I'm going to segue into a different thought here. Jesus is saying, I'm going to be with you even till the end of the age, even till the end, when you guys are looking forward to that, the fig tree in that second harvest. But I was thinking about this idea that he's with us always. And I was looking back on my life, and just kind of follow me on this thought here. There's other passages that are probably more appropriate for me to reference on this topic, but this is where I launched into it this morning personally and devotionally. So I'll just take you with me on my train of thought. I was looking at kind of back on my life and going, man, God was with me through all these different things. And so many times I wondered, what is this about? For example, uh, I spent hours and hours and hours practicing my trumpet. And I always wondered, is this really worth it? What's the point? How is God going to use this? Um, all the way through college, spending 2 hours a day on in the practice room and in several ensembles every day, and concerts and performances, and by that time I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be in music education. So I was just sort of like, is this just for fun, or how could God use the trumpet outside of an orchestra or a band or a jazz combo or something? How is this going to work? And then one day, as I was found myself in churches leading worship, I um, it someone paid for a couple vocal lessons for me to kind of sharpen up my vocals, and I had lessons from a guy from that sang in the Metropolitan Opera in Oregon City, and he was showing me all of these vocal exercises and everything, and it clicked with me. Hey, wait, these are the same exercises that my trumpet teachers and professors were teaching me about, supporting from down here in your diaphragm and opening up all of this technical stuff with your diaphragm and throat, and your in trumpet terms an embouchure, right? Your mouth set up, and in vocal terms your your diction and all that stuff with your tongue. And it clicked in my mind. I was like, wait a second, I just need to apply everything I learned on the trumpet to my vocals, and there's going to be a lot of crossover here. And that's just one little example. There's so many things that God has used in the past. I in ways that I didn't expect. I started a little youth group at this church over here, and someone else is leading it now, but it's still going. And I had a role in that ministry that's still continuing to go. Or this other church I was at, serving in the youth ministry and leading that and kind of setting a vision for that. And the guy on staff that was the maintenance tech is now the youth pastor, and was kind of raised up into that position, and is taking it further than I could have. God had took me out and replaced him with the maintenance tech, and now that ministry is going, and I had a role in that. And my point is this: God doesn't waste a thing. Grace leaves little to waste. God is with us all of our days, and he is redeeming all of these things that are seemingly, in our minds, maybe a waste of time, or maybe you can't figure out why this connects to anything eternal. It's just sort of something maybe you have to go through, and it's kind of a drag. A job that just feels like, oh man, this job is a dead end, and there's nothing here for me. And yet God is always with you, and he's sowing things into your spirit and doing things in you. If you allow him to, and you cooperate with him, he can use all of that stuff. And so I guess my encouragement to you and to myself this morning is believing that God doesn't waste a thing. And so give him something good to work with. Why not? I mean, if you give God something bad to work with, he can still redeem it and use it for great and mighty things, right? You know the testimony of the person who runs hard away from God. They just run, dive into evil, dive into sin and depravity, and then God gives them a radical transformation, and they testify to that radical transformation and what God has done in their life to pluck them out of the miry clay. And that's an amazing thing. And God redeems the worst of what we have, just like he did with Paul on the road to Damascus, right? But it's not just the radical testimony of running hard away from him and then running hard towards him that that God is in the business of redeeming. But God can use things that you give him that are good as well, right? Sometimes we overlook that. Give him something really great to work with. You might not understand how it's all going to play out. You might not understand why God has you doing what you're doing, or maybe working like outside of what you think your gifting is, or a vocation or a job or responsibility that just feels like it's not that valuable. God is doing something. Trust him. Love him enough and trust him enough to just press in and give him the best that you have. Give him the best that you have. Do you think Joseph felt that way when he was in prison? I certainly think that he felt like this is about as low as I can go. I'm here in this prison cell, nothing to do. He gave God the best, though. He said, I'm going to be the best prisoner I could be. And God used it, and he redeemed it. And God launched him forward into heights that he never dreamt. Well, that's not true. He actually did dream, and they were fulfilled. But you get the point that God wants to not waste a thing. His grace doesn't leave a whole lot of room for waste. If you trust him, if you offer it unto him, the good, the bad, the ugly, the best that you have, offer it to him. And just delight in letting him unfold his plan before you. He has great things in store for you, especially in eternity. So if you never see all the great things, all the loose ends get tied up on this side of heaven, hey, don't worry. That's not the point anyway, because we're going to heaven, and he is going to reveal to you and to me all the wonderful things that he was doing deep in us, things that we didn't even understand, that we will be able to glorify him and praise him on that day when things all come into focus, into clarity, as we're in his presence. So may he give you little surprises here and there, and remind you that he is doing things in you and through you, and he's able to leverage things that you didn't even think were leverageable, if that's a word. So God bless you, and until next time on Morning Manna.